My name is Emily, and this is the story I've carried in my heart for far too long. I don't know if I'll ever find peace, but I hope that by sharing my truth, I can finally breathe freely. I want you to feel every shiver that ran down my spine, every tear that welled up in my eyes, and every scream that I had to swallow back. Because this isn't just my story, it's a story about survival, about reclaiming your voice when the world tries to drown it out. It started on a rainy evening in our small wooden house, hidden away in the woods of Oregon. My father, George, was a towering figure, both in presence and in the fear he inspired. He had a cruel smile and eyes that seemed to pierce right through you, as if he could see your very soul trembling in the corner. My mother had passed away when I was only 3, and my older sister, Rachel, was my only solace in the dark world we called home. Rachel and I would huddle together at night, whispering stories of better days that might come if we just held on long enough. She was 2 years older than me, and she always took the brunt of his anger to shield me from it. But no matter how hard she tried, there were nights when the storm of his rage found me, too. That night, the rain pounded on the roof like 1,000 fists, and thunder rumbled in the distance. I could smell the whiskey on his breath even before he opened his mouth. He stormed into the room where we sat, our small wooden table trembling under the weight of his fury. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, and his fists were clenched so tight that his knuckles had turned white. "What did I tell you about leaving your damn toys out, Emily?" he roared, his voice echoing through the tiny room. My heart stopped. My hands were shaking as I looked down at the small stuffed bunny lying on the floor. My mother's last gift to me. I had forgotten to put it away. "I'm sorry, Daddy," I stammered, tears already welling in my eyes. "I'll put it away right now." But he didn't want to hear my apology. He wanted someone to punish, someone to make small enough, so he could feel powerful again. He grabbed me by the arm, his fingers digging into my skin like iron claws, and pulled me up so fast that my head snapped back. Rachel jumped to her feet, her face pale but determined. "Please, Daddy, it was my fault." "I'll clean it up," she said, her voice steady even though I could see the fear in her eyes. He shoved her aside like she was nothing, his attention fixed on me. "You're always so careless, Emily," he growled. "You think you can just do whatever you want and not pay for it." I tried to hold back the tears, tried to be brave like Rachel always was. But the slap came so fast, so hard, that it knocked the breath out of me. My cheek burned, and the room tilted as I fell to the floor. The taste of blood filled my mouth, and I looked up at him through a blur of tears. He turned away then, disgusted, and stomped out of the room, leaving the door swinging on its hinges. Rachel dropped to her knees beside me, her hands cupping my face, her own tears spilling over. "It's okay, Em. It's okay," she whispered, even though we both knew it wasn't. I lay there, my head resting in her lap, listening to the storm outside. The thunder matched the pounding in my skull, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. But in that moment, the only thing that mattered was Rachel's voice, soft and soothing in my ear. When the storm outside finally quieted, the house was left in an eerie silence. My father's snores drifted through the thin walls, a cruel reminder that he would sleep easy while we lay awake, our hearts still racing. Rachel and I curled up together in the bed we shared, and she held me close, her breath warm against my neck. "Someday, Em," she whispered, "we'll get out of here. We'll go somewhere he can't find us. I promise." I nodded, even though I didn't know how it could ever be true. I wanted to believe her more than anything, to believe that the world could be bigger than the prison we lived in. But the fear was a weight in my chest that I couldn't shake. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had happened. My father acted like the night before was just a bad dream, his smile cold and hollow as he poured himself a cup of coffee. He looked at me with those same piercing eyes and said, "Morning, girls." Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. "Morning, Daddy," she said softly. I didn't speak. My lips were still swollen, and I didn't trust my voice not to betray the terror that still lived in me. We went about our day like we always did, trapped in a routine that never changed. Rachel cooked breakfast while I cleaned up, both of us careful to keep everything just the way he liked it. One wrong move, and we'd feel his wrath again. After breakfast, Rachel and I slipped outside to gather firewood. The air was crisp and smelled of pine, and for a brief moment, I felt like I could breathe again. We didn't say much as we worked, but she squeezed my hand every so often, a silent promise that she was still there with me. "I found this," she said after a while, pulling a small, shiny stone from her pocket. It was smooth and warm in my hand, and she smiled when she saw my face light up. "It's a wishing stone. You hold it tight, and you wish for something with all your heart." I clutched the stone to my chest, my eyes closing as I wished for the one thing I wanted more than anything else: to be free of him, to have a life where Rachel and I could laugh without fear, where we could be sisters instead of prisoners. When we went back inside, he was waiting for us. His eyes darted from Rachel to me, suspicion written all over his face. "What were you two doing out there so long?" he demanded. "Just getting firewood, Daddy," Rachel said quickly. He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he turned away, and the moment passed. But I could feel the tension in the air, the way it coiled around us like a snake ready to strike. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the wishing stone clutched so tight in my hand that it left a mark on my palm. Rachel's breathing was slow and steady beside me, but I knew she wasn't really asleep either. We were both waiting, always waiting. When the moon was high in the sky, the door creaked open. My father stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor. My heart stopped. He didn't say a word, just pointed at Rachel. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Rachel's hand found mine under the blankets. "Please, Daddy, let Emily sleep," she begged. "Now," he barked, and she flinched. She pressed a kiss to my forehead, her lips trembling. "Stay here," she whispered. I watched her go, watched the door close behind them, and then I lay there in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds that made me want to scream. I pressed the wishing stone to my lips and closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. "Please," I wished. "Please make it stop." The next morning, Rachel's eyes were empty, her face pale and drawn. She wouldn't look at me as we went about our chores, her silence a heavy thing that pressed down on my chest. I wanted to ask her what he'd done, but I already knew. I could see it in the way she moved, in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. Days turned into weeks, each one blending into the next. My father's cruelty was a constant presence, a shadow that followed us everywhere. He would explode over the smallest things, a dish out of place, a spilled glass of water. Rachel took it all in silence, her shoulders bowed but unbroken. She was my shield, my protector. But I could see how it was wearing her down, how each day took a little more of her away. One night, I woke to find her crying in the dark. She was trying so hard to be quiet, to hide it from me, but I reached out and took her hand in mine. "I'm so sorry, Em," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I can't make it stop." "It's not your fault," I said, my own tears falling freely. "None of this is your fault." But she didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, the way she carried the blame like a burden she couldn't put down. And I hated him for that. I hated the way he turned her light into something fragile and fading. One afternoon, while he was at work, Rachel and I sat by the window, watching the rain fall. She took my hand and traced circles on my skin with her thumb. "Promise me something, Em," she said softly. "Anything," I said. "If I can't protect you anymore, you have to find a way out. You have to live." I shook my head, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Don't say that, Rachel. Don't talk like that." But she just smiled, a sad, tired smile. "Promise me." "I promise," I whispered, even though I didn't know how I'd ever keep it. That night, I hid the wishing stone under my pillow and closed my eyes. I wished for courage. I wished for a way out. And for the first time, I felt a spark of something deep inside me, a flicker of hope, small but unbreakable. The days that followed were a blur of fear and stolen moments of comfort. My father was unpredictable, his moods swinging like a pendulum. One moment he'd be laughing, the next he'd be screaming. We learned to read the signs, to hold our breath when the storm was coming. And still, Rachel was there, her presence a constant source of strength. She taught me how to hide the bruises, how to smile even when it hurt. But I could see how much it cost her, how the light in her eyes was growing dimmer with every passing day. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, she took my hand and looked at me with a fierceness I'd never seen before. "You're stronger than you think, Emily," she said. "One day, you'll find a way out. And when you do, you'll never look back." I nodded, but the truth was I didn't feel strong at all. I felt like a leaf caught in a storm, battered and broken. But her words were a seed, planted deep in my heart. A promise that maybe, just maybe, I could survive. And so I held on. I held on to the wishing stone, to Rachel's whispered promises, to the small, flickering hope that one day we would be free. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I dreamed of a world beyond the forest. A world where the sun shone bright and laughter echoed through the trees. A world where Rachel and I could be sisters again, without the weight of fear holding us down. And in that dream, I took my first breath of freedom. The next morning, the sun's rays streamed through the broken window, but it did nothing to brighten the darkness inside me. My eyes felt swollen from crying all night, and my limbs ached with exhaustion. But I knew I had no choice. I had to get up. Dad would be awake soon, and if I didn't have breakfast ready, his fury would be 10 times worse than the day before. I dragged myself out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah. She was curled up under the thin blanket, her small face still streaked with tears. My heart squeezed painfully in my chest as I watched her. She was too young to understand the horror of what was happening to us, but she felt every ounce of it. Every slap, every scream from Dad, she absorbed it like a sponge, her little body shaking with fear. I tiptoed to the kitchen, the cold floor biting at my bare feet. The kitchen was a mess, as always. Empty beer cans littered the counter, and the sink was full of dishes crusted with food from days ago. My stomach turned at the smell of stale alcohol and rotting leftovers. But I ignored it, just like I'd learned to ignore everything else. I turned on the old stove and began making oatmeal. As I stirred the pot, my mind wandered to the life I wished we had, a life where Dad woke us up with gentle words and warm hugs, not fists and curses. A life where Sarah and I could laugh and play without fear of punishment. I could almost see it, shimmering like a dream I'd once dared to hope for. But the clattering of Dad's footsteps on the stairs shattered the illusion, bringing me back to reality. "Where's my damn coffee?" he growled as he entered the kitchen, his face already twisted into that hateful sneer. "It's coming, Dad," I said quickly, reaching for the kettle. My hands trembled, but I forced them to steady. Any sign of fear would only make it worse. He sat down heavily at the table, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "You better not have burned it again," he muttered, his fingers drumming impatiently. I poured the coffee and handed it to him, careful not to spill a drop. He took a sip, his lips curling in disgust. "Tastes like shit," he spat and threw the mug across the room. It shattered against the wall, the shards scattering across the floor. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Sorry," he sneered. "You're always sorry, but you never learn, do you?" He stood up, towering over me, his hand already raised. I braced myself, but the slap still made my head spin. My cheek burned, and tears filled my eyes, but I bit them back. Crying would only make it worse. "Clean up this mess," he ordered, and stomped back to the living room. I fell to my knees, picking up the broken pieces of the mug. My hands shook so badly that I cut myself on a shard, but I didn't even feel the pain. I was too numb, too focused on keeping everything together. For Sarah. When I finally finished cleaning, I went upstairs to check on her. She was awake now, sitting on the bed with her knees pulled up to her chest. Her eyes were wide and scared, and she flinched when I entered. "It's okay, Sarah," I said softly, sitting beside her. "He's in the living room." He won't come up here right now. She didn't say anything, just stared at me with those big, sad eyes. I wrapped my arms around her, trying to shield her from the world. I wished I could take her away from all of this. I wished I could take both of us away. But I knew we had nowhere to go. No family to run to. No money. No safety. We were trapped in that house, prisoners of our father's rage and cruelty. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I cleaned, cooked, and did everything I could to keep Dad from getting angry. But it was never enough. He found fault in everything I did. My hair wasn't brushed right, the floor wasn't clean enough, the food wasn't to his liking. By evening, I was so tired I could barely stand. But I forced myself to keep going. Because if I stopped, if I let myself break, who would protect Sarah? When Dad passed out on the couch, drunk and snoring, I finally let myself breathe. I tiptoed back upstairs and found Sarah still awake, her small body trembling under the thin blanket. "Are you okay?" I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. "I'm scared, Emily," she said in a tiny voice. "I know, baby," I said, pulling her close. "I'm scared too, but I promise I'll keep you safe, no matter what." We lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaking floors, the wind howling outside, Dad's snores echoing through the walls. I held Sarah tight, trying to be the strong big sister she needed. But inside, I was falling apart. My body was bruised and aching, and my mind was a whirlwind of fear and anger. How much longer could we keep living like this? How much longer could we survive? I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that I had to keep fighting. For Sarah. For me. For the hope that one day, somehow, we would be free. The next day was the same. And the day after that. Weeks blurred together, each one a copy of the last. Dad's rages, Sarah's tears, my silent screams. But there were small moments that kept me going. Tiny flashes of hope that reminded me why I couldn't give up. Like when Sarah would smile at me, even if it was just for a second. Or when we would sit together at night, whispering dreams of a better life. "I want to be a teacher when I grow up," she told me one night, her eyes bright despite the darkness. "So I can help kids who feel scared like us." My throat tightened. "You'd be the best teacher in the world," I said, kissing her forehead. "What do you want to be, Emily?" she asked. I hesitated. I'd stopped thinking about dreams a long time ago. But looking at her, I felt a flicker of something. Maybe not a dream, but a memory of one. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, I just want to be free. I want us to be safe and happy. That's all." She nodded and snuggled closer, and for a moment, the world felt a little less scary. But that night, the illusion shattered again. Dad woke up in a rage, yelling for me to come downstairs. My heart pounded as I crept out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah. When I reached the living room, he was standing there, his face red with anger. "You think you can hide from me?" he snarled, his breath reeking of whiskey. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, my voice shaking.
"Sorry?"
"You're worthless," he roared, and shoved me hard. I fell to the floor, my head hitting the edge of the coffee table. Stars exploded in my vision, and for a second, I thought I might black out. He loomed over me, his fists clenched. "You think you're better than me? You think you can defy me?" "No, Dad, please." But he didn't hear me. His fists came down again and again, each blow sending shockwaves of pain through my body. I didn't even try to fight back. I just curled into a ball, trying to protect my head. When he finally stopped, he stood there panting, his face twisted with hate. "Clean up this mess," he spat, and staggered back to the couch. I lay there for a long time, too dazed to move. My body throbbed with pain, and hot tears streamed down my face. But I didn't cry out. I didn't scream. I just lay there in the darkness, feeling more alone than ever. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. I cleaned the blood from my face and the mess from the floor. Then I went back to Sarah's room and crawled into bed beside her. She stirred and opened her eyes. "Emily," she whispered.
"I'm okay." He lead, kissing her cheek.
Go back to sleep. She wrapped her little arms around me, and I held her tight. In that moment, I made a silent promise to her and to myself. I wouldn't let him break us. No matter how bad it got, I would find a way out. For her. For me. For the life we deserved. As I lay there, listening to Dad's drunken snores, a fire sparked inside me, a tiny ember of defiance that refused to be snuffed out. I didn't know how I'd do it or when, but I knew one thing. I would not let this be the end of our story. I would not let him destroy us. And so I clung to that ember, letting it warm the cold darkness of my heart. Because sometimes, even the smallest flame can light the way out of the shadows. The days blurred into one another, each indistinguishable from the last. The oppressive atmosphere in our home was a constant, a suffocating presence that loomed over Sarah and me. Our father's rage was unpredictable, igniting over the most trivial matters, a misplaced item, a moment of silence, or even a glance he deemed disrespectful. Each day was a tightrope walk, balancing on the edge of his volatile temper. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our small living room, I sat with Sarah, helping her with her homework. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to solve a math problem. I admired her determination, her resilience in the face of our daily struggles. Suddenly, the front door slammed open, and our father's heavy footsteps echoed through the house. My heart raced, a familiar dread settling in my stomach. He stormed into the room, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "What are you two whispering about?" he barked, his voice slurred. "Just homework, Dad," I replied cautiously, shielding Sarah with my body. He sneered, stepping closer. "Lying to me, are you? Plotting against your own father?" Before I could respond, his hand shot out, striking me across the face. Pain exploded in my cheek, but I stood firm, refusing to let him see my fear. Sarah whimpered behind me, clutching my arm. "Get to your room, both of you," he roared. We scrambled upstairs, locking the door behind us. I held Sarah as she sobbed, her small body trembling. I whispered soothing words, trying to calm her, but inside, I was seething. The injustice, the helplessness, it was all too much. That night, as Sarah slept fitfully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Thoughts raced through my mind, dark and vengeful. I imagined a life without fear, without pain. A life where Sarah could laugh freely, where I could breathe without the weight of constant anxiety. The seed of rebellion took root in my heart, nurtured by years of suffering. The next morning, I awoke early, determined to find a way out. I rummaged through the house, searching for anything of value. In a dusty drawer, I found an old, battered phone. It was outdated, but it might still work. I charged it using a hidden outlet, praying it would hold a charge. Once the phone powered on, I navigated to the contacts. Most numbers were unfamiliar, but one stood out, Aunt Lisa. I remembered her from years ago, a kind woman who had visited us occasionally before disappearing from our lives. Desperate, I dialed her number, my hands shaking. "Hello," a voice answered. "Aunt Lisa?" "It's Emily," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "Emily? Oh my God. Is that you? Are you okay?" I broke down, sobbing into the phone. I told her everything, the abuse, the fear, the hopelessness. She listened silently, her voice trembling when she finally spoke. "I'm coming to get you," she said firmly. "Pack what you can. I'll be there as soon as I can." Hope surged within me, a flicker of light in the darkness. I hung up and turned to Sarah, who was watching me with wide eyes. "We're leaving," I told her, a smile breaking through my tears. "Aunt Lisa is coming to get us." We packed our meager belongings, hiding them under the bed. The hours crawled by, each minute an eternity. Finally, as dusk settled, a car pulled into the driveway. Aunt Lisa stepped out, her face etched with concern. We rushed to her, embracing tightly. She led us to the car, and we drove away, leaving the house and our torment behind. As we drove into the night, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt free. I looked at Sarah, her face peaceful as she slept beside me, and I knew we were on the path to healing. This chapter of our lives had ended, but our story was far from over. The scars remained, but so did our strength. Together, we would rebuild, reclaiming the joy and safety that had been stolen from us. The first morning at Aunt Lisa's house was unlike any Sarah and I had ever known. Sunlight filtered gently through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. The scent of fresh coffee wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the aroma of pancakes sizzling on the stove. For a moment, I lay in bed, disoriented by the unfamiliar comfort. Then, the realization hit me: we were safe. Sarah stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, confusion giving way to a tentative smile. "Are we really here?" she whispered. I nodded, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "Yes, we are." We ventured downstairs, drawn by the inviting smells. Aunt Lisa stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. She turned to us with a warm smile. "Good morning, girls. I hope you're hungry." We sat at the table, plates piled high with pancakes and fresh fruit. As we ate, the tension that had gripped us for so long began to ease. Laughter bubbled up as Aunt Lisa shared stories from her youth, her voice a soothing balm to our frayed nerves. Over the next few days, we settled into a new routine. Aunt Lisa enrolled us in a nearby school, and we began to experience a semblance of normalcy. But the scars of our past lingered. Sarah clung to me in crowded hallways, her eyes darting nervously. I struggled to focus in class, my mind often drifting to memories I wished I could forget. One afternoon, as we walked home from school, Sarah spoke hesitantly. "Emily, do you think Dad will find us?" MW editing, 1. I stopped, kneeling to look her in the eyes.
No, Sarah.
"Aunt Lisa has made sure we're safe. He can't hurt us anymore." She nodded slowly, but the fear in her eyes remained. That evening, I found Aunt Lisa in the living room, sorting through some paperwork. "Aunt Lisa, can we talk?" She looked up, concern etched on her face. "Of course, Emily. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I want to talk to someone about what happened. Maybe a counselor or a therapist." She reached out, squeezing my hand gently. "I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll find someone for both of you to talk to." A week later, we began sessions with Dr. Thompson, a kind woman with a soothing presence. At first, I was hesitant to open up, but her patience and understanding gradually broke down my walls. Sarah was more reserved, but over time, she too began to share her feelings. Through therapy, we started to process our trauma. We learned coping mechanisms and began to rebuild our sense of self-worth. It was a slow and painful journey, but with each session, we took another step toward healing. As the weeks turned into months, we began to find joy in the little things. Sarah joined the school's art club, her drawings becoming more vibrant and expressive. I discovered a love for writing, pouring my thoughts and emotions into journals and short stories. One day, Aunt Lisa surprised us with a trip to the beach. The salty air and crashing waves were a welcome change from our daily routine. We built sandcastles, collected seashells, and laughed until our sides ached. For the first time in a long while, we felt like a family. That evening, as we watched the sunset, Aunt Lisa turned to us. "I'm so proud of both of you. You've come such a long way." I smiled, tears glistening in my eyes. "We couldn't have done it without you." She hugged us tightly. "No matter what, I'll always be here for you." As we drove home, a sense of peace settled over me. Our journey was far from over, but we were no longer alone. With love, support, and resilience, we were reclaiming our lives one day at a time. The days at Aunt Lisa's home settled into a comforting rhythm. Sarah and I began to find solace in the predictability of our new life. The nightmares that once plagued our sleep became less frequent, replaced by dreams of hope and healing. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, the sun casting a warm glow over the yard, Aunt Lisa joined me with 2 glasses of lemonade. We sipped in silence for a moment before she spoke. Emily, I've been thinking. Have you considered sharing your story? It might help others who are going through similar experiences. I looked at her, the idea both terrifying and empowering. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted. She nodded understandingly. When you are, know that your voice can be a beacon for someone lost in the darkness. That evening, I sat at my desk, pen in hand, and began to write. The words flowed, raw and unfiltered, as I recounted the pain, the fear, and the resilience that had brought me to this point. Each sentence was a step toward liberation, a shedding of the chains that had bound me for so long. As the weeks passed, I continued to write, filling pages with memories and reflections. Sarah, too, found her outlet in art, her drawings evolving from dark, chaotic images to vibrant expressions of hope and joy. One day, Aunt Lisa surprised us with a visit to a local community center. Inside, we found a group of individuals gathered in a circle, sharing their stories of survival and healing. It was a support group for survivors of abuse. At first, I was hesitant to speak, but as I listened to others, I realized the power of shared experiences. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and began to speak. The words trembled at first, but with each sentence, my voice grew stronger. My name is Emily, I began, and I'm a survivor. The room responded with nods of understanding and support. In that moment, I felt a sense of belonging, a connection to others who had walked similar paths. After the meeting, a woman approached me. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said. It gave me the courage to speak up. Her words resonated deeply, reinforcing the importance of breaking the silence. Back at home, Sarah and I continued to heal, our bond growing stronger with each passing day. We found joy in the simple things, cooking meals together, exploring the neighborhood, and watching movies late into the night. One afternoon, as we walked through the park, Sarah turned to me. "Emily, do you think we'll ever see Dad again?" I paused, considering my response. "I don't know," I admitted. "But if we do, we'll face it together." She nodded, her hand slipping into mine.
Together.
That night, I received a call from Dr. Thompson, our therapist. She informed me that our father had been arrested for unrelated charges and was currently in custody. A mix of emotions washed over me, relief, anger, and a lingering sadness. I shared the news with Sarah, who listened quietly. "Does this mean we're safe now?" she asked. "Yes," I assured her. "We're safe." In the days that followed, we continued our journey of healing, embracing the freedom that came with the knowledge that our past no longer held power over us. We celebrated milestones, both big and small, and looked toward the future with hope and determination. Through therapy, community, and the unwavering support of Aunt Lisa, we transformed our pain into strength, our silence into a voice that could inspire and uplift others. Our story was no longer one of victimhood, but of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond of sisterhood. The morning light streamed in through the window, soft and golden, as I woke up to a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Aunt Lisa's house was warm and smelled of pancakes and syrup, a comforting aroma that drew me to the kitchen. Sarah was already there, helping Aunt Lisa stir batter, her laughter light and sweet. It was a sound I'd missed for so long, a melody that spoke of innocence and freedom. I joined them, and together we cooked breakfast, a small but powerful act of normalcy that reminded me we were building a new life, one meal at a time. As we sat at the table, Aunt Lisa said, "I know you've both been through so much. Healing doesn't happen overnight, but I want you to know you're safe here. You'll always have a home with me." I nodded, my throat tight with gratitude. "Thank you, Aunt Lisa. We're so lucky to have you." She reached across the table, her hand resting over mine. "I'm lucky to have you girls, too." After breakfast, I decided to take Sarah out for a walk. The park near Aunt Lisa's house had become our sanctuary, a place where we could breathe deeply and let the sun kiss our skin without fear. The grass was dewy and the air smelled fresh and clean, full of promise. As we strolled along the winding path, Sarah asked, "Emily, do you think we'll ever be able to forget everything?" I looked down at her young face so full of hope and vulnerability. "I don't know if we'll ever forget," I said honestly, "but I think we'll learn to live with it. We'll make new memories, happier ones, and they'll help us heal." She nodded, her hand squeezing mine. "I like that. I want to make good memories." We spent hours in the park, lying in the grass, watching the clouds drift across the sky. We laughed at the shapes we saw: a dragon, a castle, a funny little dog, and for a moment, it felt like we were just two sisters, safe and happy. That night, as Sarah and I snuggled on the couch watching an old movie, Aunt Lisa joined us. She'd always had a way of making even the smallest moments feel special. Her presence alone was enough to make us feel secure. "Emily," she said softly, "I want to ask you something." "Of course," I said, turning to face her. "I know you've been writing everything down, your memories, your feelings. Would you ever consider turning it into a book? Something that could help other people who might be going through the same thing." The idea was daunting, but as she spoke, I felt something stir inside me. I'd been so focused on surviving, on protecting Sarah and myself, that I hadn't thought about what sharing our story might mean for others. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. I think I'd like that." Aunt Lisa smiled. "Take your time. You've already come so far." Over the next few weeks, I kept writing, filling page after page with every painful memory, every moment of hope. The process was raw and exhausting, but also healing in a way I hadn't expected. With each word, I felt the weight of my past lift, as if I was finally letting go of the pain that had held me captive for so long. One afternoon, as I sat in my room, writing by the window, Sarah knocked softly on the door. "Can I come in?" she asked, peeking in with that shy smile I loved so much. "Of course," I said, setting my pen down. She crawled onto the bed beside me, her small hand resting on my arm. "What are you writing?"
Our story, I said.
"About us and everything we've been through." "Can I read it?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I hesitated, but then nodded. "When it's done, I want you to know how strong you are, how strong we both are." She hugged me tightly. "I already know, Emily, because you're my big sister, and you're the bravest person I know." Her words filled me with a fierce pride, and I realized that no matter how dark our past had been, we had come through it together, and that was what truly mattered. One evening, Aunt Lisa took us to a community gathering at the local library. It was a night of storytelling, people from all walks of life sharing their experiences, their struggles, their triumphs. As we listened, I felt the power of those voices, the way their words wove together to create something beautiful and strong. When it was my turn to speak, my heart raced. But I stepped up to the microphone, my hands trembling, and began to tell our story. My voice was unsteady at first, but as I spoke, I felt a surge of determination. "I grew up in a house where fear lived in every corner," I began. "My father was a man who believed he could control us with his fists and his words. For years, my sister and I lived in that shadow, believing we were powerless. But we weren't. We found strength in each other. And we found a home with a woman who showed us that love doesn't have to hurt." The room was silent, every eye on me. I took a deep breath and continued. "We're still healing. We still have bad days. But we're learning that our past doesn't define us. And we're not alone." When I finished, there was a moment of quiet, and then the room erupted in applause. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they were tears of relief, of release. I'd spoken my truth, and had been heard. Afterward, people came up to me, sharing their own stories, thanking me for my courage. And in that moment, I realized that sharing our pain doesn't make us weak, it makes us stronger. That night, back at home, Sarah wrapped her arms around me. "I'm proud of you, Emily," she whispered. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her love. "I'm proud of you, too." As I lay in bed that night, I thought about how far we'd come. from the terror of those dark days to the hope that now filled our lives. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were living. And no matter what the future held, I knew we'd face it together. In the quiet of the night, I whispered a promise to myself and to Sarah. We would keep going. We would keep healing. And we would never let anyone steal our light again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. I stirred awake, the familiar scent of Aunt Lisa's lavender-scented sheets enveloping me in comfort. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace that wasn't fleeting. Downstairs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of pancakes sizzling on the griddle. Sarah's laughter echoed from the kitchen, a sound that had become more frequent and genuine over the past months. I smiled, cherishing these simple moments that now filled our days. As we sat around the breakfast table, Aunt Lisa looked at us with a thoughtful expression. "Girls, I've been thinking," she began. "It's been a year since you came to live with me. You've both grown so much, and I'm incredibly proud of you." Sarah beamed, her eyes shining with happiness. "It's all thanks to you, Aunt Lisa. You've given us a home and so much love." Aunt Lisa reached across the table, squeezing our hands gently. "You've both shown incredible strength and resilience. I believe it's time to celebrate this new chapter in our lives." Later that day, we visited the local community center, where a support group for survivors of abuse was holding a special event. The room was filled with people who had faced their own battles and emerged stronger. As we listened to their stories, I felt a deep connection, knowing we shared a common journey. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my heart pounding. "My name is Emily," I began, "and I'm a survivor." The room fell silent, every eye on me. I took a deep breath and continued. "A year ago, my sister and I escaped a life of fear and pain. Today, we're healing, growing, and learning to trust again. It's not easy, but with support and love, it's possible." Applause erupted, and I felt a surge of empowerment. Sharing our story wasn't just about us, it was about giving hope to others. Back home, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever forget what happened?" she asked softly. I wrapped my arm around her. "We may not forget, but we can choose how it shapes us. We're not defined by our past, but by how we move forward." She nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "Then let's keep moving forward, together." As the stars began to twinkle above, I felt a sense of closure. Our journey wasn't over, but we had turned a page. With each new day, we were writing a story of resilience, love, and hope, a story that was uniquely ours. Thank you for listening to this story, my dear ones. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Grandma's Tales. Like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from. I love hearing from each and every one of you. Until we meet again in another story, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, you are never alone.